On September 22nd, 2024, I posted an 11-minute video where I talked about the pilot episode of the television series Lost. The video absolutely flopped, but I maintained the intention to eventually return to the show in a brand new deep dive series. This is that video, so I hope you enjoy. Really quick, if you weren't aware, Lost follows a group of 48 strangers who board Oceanic Flight 815 from Sydney, Australia to Los Angeles. The plane eventually crash lands on a secluded tropical island that houses a variety of very odd and unexplainable things, such as polar bears, an unopened man-made hatch in the ground, a crazy woman who was previously shipwrecked there for 16 years, and finally a creature living in the jungle that kills any person who gets too close. The island also notably has some kind of mysterious property that heals all of its inhabitants of literally any affliction they could possibly have. More on that later though. I will elaborate on literally everything I just said at some point in this video. I'm just giving you guys a little tease if you weren't aware about what's going on in this series. Together, the 48 castaways must find a way to overcome their differences in order to survive. When they realize that rescue isn't coming anytime soon, they decide that if they can't live together, they are all going to die alone. So I already know I'm going to get like a lot of comments about the structure of this video and why I've decided to break it down the way I did. After the first episode, I will be going down the line of characters, analyzing their past and present day storylines in order to piece each of their stories together, because I think that's a lot more interesting and challenging than just flat out recapping everything in order. So, for example, the first character I'm going to be talking about is Jack Shepherd. I'm going to go through all of his backstories within just the first season, and then I'm going to basically try and piece together the timeline of when each of those things happen, as well as the present day plots on the island, because if you didn't know, Lost, each episode focuses on one person or a group of people, and it does this by splitting the present day and the past storylines, so we get insights into the characters' lives before they crash landed on the island. So I'm going to be going into each character and all of their flashbacks and all of their present day episodes and breaking down the characters from that lens, if that makes any sense. This also means I'm not going to be recapping every single event like I have previously. It's going to be a little bit less of a recap in that sense, but it still is a recap because I'm not full on only analyzing these characters. I get a lot of comments where people are just like, this is just a straight up recap. Well, yes, it says it's a recap in the title, or it says it's a deep dive, which is just essentially the same thing. Brief notes aside, the first episode of Lost is a perfect episode in my opinion. I have a whole video on it, like I said before. I'm actually going to insert a small little clip from it, so I don't have to recap the first episode again. The pilot episode opens with a man named Jack waking up in what appears to be a secluded jungle. After coming across a white dog, Jack begins walking and then running as he's started to panic in sheer terror due to the fact that he's just survived what happens to be one of mine and most other people's biggest fears. Jack has just survived a plane crash. The episode then spends its next 7 minutes completely saturating your screen with the sound of total unrest. The burning plane fuselage draped across the white sand, surrounded by its own passengers, is nothing if not nightmarish. Our hero Jack, who happens to be a doctor, rushes over to a man who's caught under a plane leg. He has two other passengers help him, but before they're able to remove the leg from atop the man's body, a pregnant woman in the distance begins writhing in pain with what is assumed to be contractions. While Jack converses with her, a man is pulled into the engine by force before it explodes like a volcano, painting the scene and everyone in it with burning shrapnel. Jack has another passenger help calm the woman down before running over to another woman who is unconscious. Jack is able to successfully perform CPR on her before noticing that the plane wing is about to fall on the pregnant woman and the man next to her. Jack then rushes to them and gets them out of the way just before the wing falls. After it falls and explodes, the scene sits in slow motion, finally allowing us to absorb the utter chaos and destruction unfolding in front of our eyes. The survivors sleep on the beach and make sure to keep the signal fire burning. The morning after the plane crash, a trio of survivors comprised of Jack, a former rock star named Charlie, a woman named Kate, all make their way to the plane's cabin to discover the pilot alive. They attempt to use the plane's transceiver to pick up a signal, but just then are attacked by an unseen monster. The plane's captain is taken by the monster, as evidenced by the spray of blood on the plane window, allowing for the other three to escape with the transceiver. After they make their way back to the beach, things have already gotten heated, with the survivors fighting over each other's belongings. One man named Sawyer accuses another named Sayid of being the cause of the plane crash, prompting Kate to put an end to their arguing. Later that day, another group attempts to climb to higher ground in order to boost the transceiver's chances of picking up a signal. On their trek, they encounter the aforementioned polar bear, as well as confirm that the transceiver is working when it begins playing a pre-recorded message from 16 years ago. The message relayed is in French, so a woman named Shannon, who conveniently just so happens to understand the language, translates and reveals the woman who is speaking found herself on the island with her French research team, and somehow they never made it off. The woman goes on to explain that the rest of her team were all killed, presumably by the thing living in the jungle, meaning the chances of rescue are slim to none. You may have noticed I failed to mention large plot details and moments throughout the episode, and that's because this video is not going to be solely a recap. I'm going to be primarily analyzing each character and all of their storylines throughout the season. So for example, first I'm going to dive into the character of Jack Shephard, his backstories, character moments, as well as the major events in the episodes that center on him. Jack Shephard is definitely the closest thing the series has to a main protagonist. The series literally opens with him waking up in the jungle and making his way to the beach where he helps save countless people. Before the crash, Jack was a second-generation doctor who was well respected and highly regarded as one of the best in the hospital. Jack's need to help other survivors throughout the season is rooted in a conversation he had with his father when he was younger. This conversation comes as a result of Jack's actions at school that day. Jack had the opportunity to save a friend of his from being bullied, causing he himself to be beaten on, which forced him to back down. That night, Jack's father, Christian Shephard, reveals to Jack that if he let himself dwell on the people that he was unable to save in the ER, he'd never enjoy his life. This stern lecture gives us an inside look into not only Jack's need to save people in order to prevent himself from having to confront the fact that he wasn't able to, but also into Christian, who seemingly has no issue letting his mistakes go. We see this dichotomy between the two again in episode 11, titled All the Best Cowboys Have Daddy Issues. Jack, now a doctor himself, is called into the operating room hours into emergency surgery, which is being performed by Christian, who is completely drunk off his ass. The woman he is operating on dies, and Jack forces Christian to call her time of death. In later scenes, Christian has already washed his hands of the woman and seemingly has moved on from her death like it was absolutely nothing. According to Jack, his father had no business being in that operating room considering how wasted he was. Eventually, Jack and his father are asked to make statements about what went on in the OR, and once Jack learns that the patient was pregnant, he decides to change his story, revealing to the higher-ups at the hospital that Christian was operating under the influence, effectively costing Christian his job and pension. Jack cannot in good faith continue to let his father fuck up in this way. In the first flashback from when Jack was a child, Christian lectures him, claiming that he, quote, doesn't have what it takes. Throughout the season, we're constantly reminded of this trait in other flashbacks between the two. A few years before Jack got his father fired, Christian gives Jack a pep talk right before his wedding. This time, Christian claims Jack's strengths are that he is very committed. This can be interpreted in many different ways as it relates to this specific episode. In the past, it basically correlates to the fact that Jack has a hard time letting go of a relationship when he knows it's probably not the strongest. Back in episode 5, titled White Rabbit, Jack learns through his mother that Christian has run off to Australia. She begs Jack to go to Australia in order to bring Christian home to them. After investigating Christian's hotel room, Jack learns that the man is on a bender. Eventually, he learns that Christian was involved in a bar fight, which led to his death. A little bit later on, Jack IDs his father's body and brings his coffin back to the States with him. In the first flashback of the first episode, while on a plane, Jack tries to soothe a worried woman named Rose sitting next to him once they begin to hit turbulence. This goes back to Jack's need to save others in spite of his father's efforts to get him to do the opposite. Once the plane goes down, Jack is a real hero to everyone around him. They all grow to think of him as their leader. He was the one to help the pregnant Claire get to safety when the wing of the plane collapsed. He helped revive Rose, who was momentarily unconscious. He helped unbury a man from under a plane leg. Most other survivors of the plane crash were just worried about themselves, but Jack was worried about everyone else around him. In the 5th episode, Jack's spent a total of 6 days on the island at this point, and hasn't slept through a single night. Each day there's a new dilemma for him to solve, the latest of which saw him failing to rescue a drowning woman in the ocean. Sleep deprived and feeling survivor's guilt about the woman's passing, Jack begins seeing his father dressed head to toe in a suit, despite knowing the man is dead. He wanders into the jungle chasing what could be his father's ghost. Jack is eventually led by this quote-unquote ghost to his father's coffin. The scene just so happens to be at a fresh water source at the very moment the camp has started running out of water. Jack opens his father's coffin and discovers the body is missing. Jack is overcome with rage, believing he's just wasted an entire day chasing a ghost. A chase that did not even give him closure about his father's passing. Jack decides to destroy the coffin before returning to camp, delivering this season-defining speech.
It's been 6 days. We're all still waiting for someone to come. But what if they don't? We have to stop waiting. A woman died this morning just going for a swim. And he tried to save her, and now you're about to crucify him? Every man for himself is not gonna work. God knows how long we're gonna be here. But if we can't live together, we're gonna die alone.
This is sort of when Jack completely cements his place as the leader of the group. Before, he was running from it, but whatever he was able to do out in the jungle made him realize that his place as the leader is what the camp needs. So, throughout the rest of the season, Jack acts as the camp's leader, making decisions for them based on what he believes is the right thing to do. In episode 6, titled House of the Rising Sun, he attempts to force everybody in the camp to move to the caves he found in the previous one. The camp remains divided on whether to stay or go, so half of them leave for the caves and the other half stay on the beach, hoping to signal for rescue. Among these stayers is Kate, who needs to get off the island. More on that later though. This creates a huge tension between Jack and Kate, who normally are on the same page about a lot of issues. Kate believes that if they venture out into the jungle, it's like the survivors giving up hope, whereas Jack sees it as an opportunity to seize the wonderful shelter that the caves provide, as well as the limitless running water supply. In episode 7, titled The Moth, Jack and Hurley move all of the goers' things into the caves, which eventually results in a cave-in involving Charlie as well. Jack ends up dislocating his shoulder in this event, which forces Charlie to help him escape. After reuniting with the other castaways, Jack is embraced by Kate, who promptly expresses her concerns about everyone living in the caves. Kate and Sawyer begin to sorta grow as friends in these next couple episodes, which directly prevents Jack from doing the same with her, as both Jack and Sawyer have their eye on Kate romantically at the same time. Jack no doubt sees Kate's decision to stay at the beach as her unconsciously choosing Sawyer over him, which by the way is ridiculous, because these people have only known each other for like a week and a half. In Confidence Man, Jack reaches his limit for bullshit when Sawyer allegedly steals Shannon's medication, causing an even larger rift between the two. You see, Sawyer is kind of like the antagonist of Jack's life. In episode 2, Jack searches the plane for medical supplies and encounters Sawyer stealing from suitcases for his own private stash. When Jack tries to suggest he give his things up for the benefit of the whole group, Sawyer simply proclaims they are in the Wild West now, and the kind of rules that applied in the real world are now null and void. Since that very scene, it seems as if Jack and Sawyer have been at each other's throats. In episode 3, Sawyer gets his hand on a gun and shoots a dying man. Don't worry, we'll get more into it later. A man who Jack has just spent all episode operating on. However, Sawyer's attempt to kill this man out of mercy fails, which causes Jack to suffocate him himself. On many occasions, Jack Jack finds himself at odds with Sawyer as he's kind of the antithesis of Jack. Jack's a doctor, a leader, a community builder. Sawyer is brash, wild, and self-centered, and yet both men constantly compete for Kate's attention, whether or not she's willing to entertain them. In the middle of the season, Jack helps Claire out with her bad dreams, eventually misdiagnosing them as pregnancy-related nightmares. Once Claire's fears come true and a mysterious man kidnaps her, Jack cannot help but feel guilty. He spends the entirety of episode 11 searching for her and Charlie, who was also kidnapped. This all goes back to Jack's need to save people, which I elaborated on earlier. Towards the end of the season in Do Not Harm, Jack must operate on Boone, who recently got into an accident thanks to Locke. Again, I'll get more into that later. Jack ultimately has to make a decision about whether or not he's going to continue to save Boone. Jack's not exactly new to this kind of dilemma, as doctors regularly have to make judgment calls surrounding patients, and on this island, things are no different. Jack's season 1 development pretty much ends here before the season 1 finale. From this point forward, I'll talk about him a little bit more sporadically, but for now, let's just move on to our next character. I'd be remiss if I didn't jump straight from Jack to Kate Austen, who quickly becomes like his second in command. Kate commonly assists Jack in decision-making and joins him on various missions. The two quickly form a bond with each other that has slight romantic undertones. I mean, literally in their first scene together, Kate helps Jack stitch a wound up on his back. Throughout episode 2, the group quickly realizes that a US Marshal was on the plane with them and was escorting a fugitive to the States. This fugitive, guys, spoilers, is Kate. With the US Marshal indisposed at camp, her true identity is safe while her and some of the others trek through the jungle in order to get to higher ground. Another survivor named Sawyer eventually uses a gun to kill a polar bear that they encounter on the way. He reveals he got the gun from the Marshal's body, and this is when Kate takes the gun away from Sawyer and takes the bullets out to prevent him from shooting anybody else. By all accounts, so far, Kate is just like Jack, willing to do anything to de-escalate a situation. And yet, Kate is supposedly a criminal. We don't exactly know what she did as of the second episode, but answers do come later on, which I'll get into. Back at the campsite, Jack finds her mugshot on the Marshal, which confirms she's the fugitive. At one point, the Marshal wakes up and attempts to warn Jack about Kate, saying, "Where is she?" Jumping forward a bit in the season, but backward in time, to episode 22, roughly 2 years before the plane crash, Kate is currently on the run for committing some sort of crime that the audience is not aware of yet. Kate orchestrates a meeting between herself and her hospitalized mother, enlisting her childhood best friend Tom in order to help them get in the same room together. The day before all of this, though, she spends the entire day with Tom, and they unearth a childhood time capsule, reliving memories together and reminiscing about what their lives could have been like if they had stayed friends or perhaps gotten married like they had planned to do when they were kids. Once Kate reunites with her mother, she is immediately shunned and her mother starts screaming for help. Kate is able to make an escape with Tom's help, but not before she accidentally gets him killed. Earlier in the episode, Kate's need to constantly run away is called into question by Tom, and how apropos of her to do just that right after getting him killed. Kate is able to get away, but she leaves behind a toy airplane the duo had bonded over just the night prior. Months later, in episode 12, titled Whatever the Case May Be, Kate helps rob a bank just to get this toy airplane out of a safe deposit box in New Mexico, of all places. She makes yet again another escape, and by episode 3, Kate finds herself in Australia on an old man's farm. For 3 months, she makes herself useful and works for the man who has just lost his wife. After she earns enough money to make a break for it, she does. The reason Kate feels the need to change addresses and move around a lot has a lot to do with her being wanted and all, but there's actually a lot more to it than just that, which I'll get into more in the other videos in this series, since a lot of her backstories are saved for later seasons. The old man catches her trying to leave and offers to drive her to the train station the following day. Only as they drive, Kate quickly realizes that the man has called a US Marshal on her. Because Kate will do anything to get away, she crashes crashes this man's car, eventually getting caught by the US Marshal when she tries to save the man who took her in. This shows that despite Kate's need to get away, she couldn't leave a man who took her in and gave her a home and job to die there. And it all led to her getting caught, so that shows that at least Kate has some sort of moral compass. In episode 2, Kate sits in the middle of the plane and tries to ask for a favor of the US Marshal. Just then, the plane hits turbulence and the Marshal is knocked out by falling suitcases. Kate witnesses the entire thing and even tries to save the Marshal, again displaying that Kate's not actually a bad person despite her criminal status. In the present day of episode 3, Jack confronts Kate about her mugshot when she tries to get him to put the Marshal, who's in critical condition by the way, out of his misery. Later on, Sawyer ends up executing, or rather attempting to execute, the Marshal using the gun, which fails, causing Jack to smother him. The next day, Kate tries to explain her past to Jack, who claims he doesn't really need to know because everyone on the island has sort of been granted a do-over. Whatever they did before the crash, who they were, is not who they need to be in order to survive. After Jack decides to leave for the caves in episode 6, Kate makes the choice to stick with the group at the beach in order to continue burning the signal fire. A number of characters join her like Sayid, Sawyer, Walt, and Michael. With half the castaways gone, the relationships of those at the beach grow. Sawyer and Kate become somewhat friendly while he's not lying about stealing people's medicine and holding everyone's belongings hostage. This leads us to episode 12, titled Whatever the Case May Be, where Kate spends all episode fighting with Sawyer over a briefcase they found together in the water. Kate claims that this briefcase belongs to her, so therefore she should have it. Sawyer wants to know why she is so hell-bent on hiding what is inside. By the end of the episode, along with Jack's help, she obtains the key from the now dead US Marshal's pocket, allowing her to open the briefcase and find the toy plane she cherishes so dearly. Jack forces Kate to admit what the plane means to her, eventually getting her to reveal,
"It belonged to the man I loved.
The truth.
It belonged to the man I loved.
Stop lying to me. Tell me the truth."
It belonged to the man I killed.
Despite Kate's status as a wanted criminal, she holds so much guilt about what has happened to people around her. In episode 16, titled Outlaws, Kate's relationship with Sawyer is somewhat mended when they bond over a drinking game and he reveals he's a big softy at heart, sparing a pig who was terrorizing him all episode. Another person Kate grows a relationship with is Sun, who shows her how to tend to the garden that she started at the edge of camp. In Hearts and Minds, the duo are doing just that when Kate figures out a crucial secret regarding Sun that I'll save for a bit later when I actually get to her. Lastly, Kate grows quite close with Claire throughout the season. Once Claire returns from her stint in the jungle, Kate is one of the survivors who tries to get Claire to remember who she is. By episode 20, while Jack's busy dealing with Boone's injuries, Kate must be the one to deliver Claire's baby on the other side of the island. Seeing as Kate has never done this before, the situation ends up bonding these women who pretty much had to do everything without any help from Charlie and Jin, who just spectated from afar. Keep this storyline in mind for season 4, it's very important. Kate's season 1 storyline comes to a head in Born to Run, the penultimate episode before the 3-part finale. In this episode, the rest of the camp learns that Kate was the prisoner that the US Marshal was escorting to the States. Sawyer only reveals this bit of information just as Kate's need to run away rears its ugly head as she's accused of poisoning Michael in order to get onto the boat. According to Sawyer anyway, Kate poisoned Michael in order to get Michael to throw Sawyer off the raft and allow Kate onto it. Once Kate is revealed to be a criminal, all the goodwill that she had built up over the last few months was completely washed away. However, it doesn't last as the camp has bigger things to worry about in the 3-part finale. John Locke is the hunter of the group. In the pilot episode, John doesn't really do a whole lot besides stare off into the ocean ominously and also offer to teach a child named Walt how to play backgammon. In episode 19, titled Deus Ex Machina, I think I'm saying that correctly, prior to crashing on the island, Locke is confronted by a woman claiming to be his birth mother, who eventually tells him he was immaculately conceived. John eventually looks further into this as he hires a private investigator to research his past. The PI eventually leads John to his birth father named Anthony Cooper. Anthony takes him hunting for the first time in the episode, and we see that this is sort of when John's fascination with being an outdoorsman began. Eventually, John realizes his father requires a kidney transplant, so he happily offers his up to him. However, after the surgery, this whole thing proves to be a setup, as John is completely ignored by Anthony once Anthony gets what he wants. John is left to sob in his car, calling out for the only man he's ever been able to call dad. John has a lot of daddy issues, which we'll get into in later episodes, but this episode really sets up the foundation for that specific aspect of his character. In episode 4, titled Walkabout, years and years later, John is now working at a box company as he prepares to take an extended vacation from his monotonous job. He decides to go on an Australian walkabout. As the bus prepares to leave, John is shunned by the tour guide, who states,
"You misrepresented yourself."
I never lied.
By omission, Mr. Locke. You neglected to tell us about your condition.
My condition is not an issue. I've lived with it for 4 years. It's never kept me from doing anything.
This is where it's revealed that John has been in a wheelchair for the last 4 years. After the crash, John is miraculously able to walk again. This is why John always looks so chipper during the present day storyline, despite the current situation. He views the island as a miracle, a mystical island that somehow restored his ability to walk. No one else catches on to this quote-unquote miracle for quite some time, and John actually spends a good portion of the series trying to get the rest of the camp to see that the island is built on faith. He constantly argues with basically everyone around him that they survived the crash for a purpose. Back to the present day of Walkabout for a second, the camp runs out of food from the plane, so John, being the burly man of the woods, decides that they need to put together a hunting party to fetch them some wild boar to eat. Kate and Michael go along with him, and after a brief encounter with the mysterious monster of the jungle, John is separated from the other two. Eventually, at the end of the episode, he returns to camp having actually caught a boar. Notably, John doesn't mention his encounter with the mysterious monster that happened earlier. We just don't know what happened there. They just never show us. So, one relationship I haven't talked all that much about yet is Jack and Locke. At one point, Jack falls off a cliff and John is there to rescue him. The two have the first of many conversations about what brought them to the island and what it means to them. Going forward, John will refer to himself as a man of faith, whereas Jack refers to himself as a man of science, being a doctor and all. The duo's relationship eventually evolves into more of a nuanced partnership for a while, but for now they don't see eye to eye on much besides wanting to protect and take care of the rest of the camp. In episode 11, titled All the Best Cowboys Have Daddy Issues, while looking for a missing Charlie and Claire, Boone and Locke discover something buried in the ground. This turns out to be a hatch. They spend an ungodly number of episodes trying to open it, but literally nothing works. 2 episodes later, in Hearts and Minds, we actually witness Boone and Locke attempting to open the hatch. Locke states,
Ludovico Buonarroti, Michelangelo's father. He beat him. No child of his was going to use his hands for a living, so Michelangelo learned not to use his hands. Years later, a visiting prince came into Michelangelo's studio and found the master staring at a single 18-foot block of marble. Michelangelo had come in every day for the past 4 months, stared at the marble, and gone home for his supper. So the prince asked the obvious, "What are you doing?" and whispered, "Sto lavorando." I'm working. 3 years later, that block of marble was the statue of David.
We're not going to stare at this thing for 4 months, are we? How are we going to open it?
Well, that's what we have to figure out. That's why we're sitting here.
Locke personally relates the story of Michelangelo's David to this mysterious hatch the island, quote, led him to. He believes that everything is happening on the island for a reason, even though he has literally no proof or evidence to support his claims. Locke's key character trait remains that he has faith. Whatever he saw in episode 4 out in the jungle, grouped with the fact that his ability to walk magically came back to him once they crashed, caused him to believe that the island has some kind kind of mystic power. His delusions become far worse when he has a dream in episode 19, which depicts a yellow plane crashing on the island not too far from their camp. The next morning, he and Boone venture into the jungle to try and find this yellow plane that he believes is real with literally no evidence, and by golly, he eventually does find it. It's also worth noting here that as John gets closer to the plane, his legs stop working, and he grows weaker. Eager to get up inside the plane, he insists Boone climb up instead, which eventually causes the plane to fall while Boone is still inside. John is able to get an injured Boone back to camp as his legs regain feeling. He interprets his temporary injury as the island saving him in exchange for Boone's safety up in the airplane.
I've done everything you wanted me to do, so why did you do this? Why?
In the following episode, he even mentions that Boone was
sacrifice that the island demanded.
This all goes back to his belief that the island's mystic plan for everyone there. He's constantly putting himself and or others in danger to try and appease the island or find some kind of answers as to why they all crashed there and why his feeling came back in his legs. Locke spends the penultimate episode showing Sayid and Jack the hatch he's spent all season trying to open, explaining that 2 nights prior, the window lit up as he was pounding on it. Jack actually agrees that it should be opened, believing that there could be supplies or food inside, and Sayid tries to talk the duo out of it before this scene abruptly ends. This eventually leads Locke to the 3-part finale, which I will get into when I get to that part of the video. Jin and Sun Kwon are a wealthy Korean couple who, for the most part, keep to themselves in the beginning of the series. Jin is seen as a very aggressive and protective husband to Sun. He frequently catches her trying to communicate with others and immediately puts an end to every attempt. While Sun is depicted as a very timid yet kind woman, constantly looking to branch out to create a community, Jin's attitude towards the other survivors is very stark in comparison. In the pilot episode, Jin tells Sun,
다른 사람 신경 쓰지 말고 우린 같이 있어야 돼.
This is our first time meeting these two characters, and immediately we realize that their relationship is likely quite traditional. I'm not going to lie and say I know that much about Korean or East Asian culture, especially as it pertains to 20 years ago, but this seems to be a very common depiction of marriage, at least as far as I've seen. The husband is usually the breadwinner and dominant towards the wife. Of course, not all relationships are a monolith, but I wonder if this is something that the writers decided to include based on a stereotype, or if this is just the story they had in mind. In the second episode of the series, Sun is forced to button up her shirt to the very top when Jin sees her talking to Michael, yet again showcasing Jin's protective nature. This immediately endears the audience to Sun and sets Jin up as a bad guy. Even if it's seen as somewhat normal in their culture for women to dress conservatively, it's the way in which he puts her modesty above her comfort during this entire plane crash situation that kind of soils his favorability, at least in the beginning. In episode 3, Jin yet again belittles Sun by saying,
잠깐 이리 와봐.
예?
이 모습 좀 봤니? 이 옷하고 얼굴이 너무 더러워 보여. 빨리 씻으라. 자기야. 사랑해.
This causes her to wash up in private, allowing her to accidentally be seen by Michael, who apologizes to her and runs away. Throughout the season, Sun provides many different amenities due to her knowledge of herbs and natural medicine. In episode 4, titled Walkabout, she teaches Walt to brush his teeth with aloe, and in the 8th episode, Confidence Man, after Shannon runs out of inhalers, she eventually tells Jack that she found some eucalyptus to spread on Shannon's chest in order to stop her coughing fit. At some point throughout the season, Sun begins gardening, and her and Kate spend quite a lot of time together tending to the plants. But 2 questions remain about Sun and Jin. The first, if Jin treats Sun so horribly, then why does she stay with him? And the second, what could have possibly made Jin this way? so protective and sensitive to her becoming friends with others? These questions are what surround these two characters for a good chunk of the season until we get answers in episode 6 and 17. In episode 6, titled House of the Rising Sun, many years before the crash, Sun's father gives Jin his blessing, which allows him to ask Sun to marry him. Throughout the episode, Jin gifts Sun many different things, such as a dog, flowers, and a ring to show his unwavering love for her. The duo eventually have plans to run away to America. However, the one condition that Sun's father has for Jin marrying Sun is that he works for him and his company, so this kind of throws a monkey wrench into their plan of moving to America. One night, Jin comes home completely covered in blood, forcing Sun to question,
다쳤어? 무슨 일이야? 이 피는 누구 피야? 사실 무슨 일 있었구나.
일하러 왔어.
일하고 왔다고? 대체 아빠 밑에서 무슨 일을 하는 거야? 얘기 좀 해봐. 날 좀 봐봐. 무슨 일을 봐.
아버님이 시키는 대로 할 뿐이야. 나 우리를 위해서 하는 거야.
On her way to a business trip with Jin, Sun plans to run away to America without Jin because he's grown to be quite violent and untrustworthy. However, in this airport, Jin gives Sun a flower, causing her to change her mind about leaving him. She blows off her cab in order to stay with Jin because deep down, she still believes he's a good man who's still in love with her. Beneath all of the chaos, she can't bring herself to walk away because she cares so much about him. In the 17th episode, titled In Translation, we witness the exact same episode pretty much told from the perspective of Jin. Once Jin becomes employed by Mr. Peck, he is forced to, quote, deliver messages for him. These so-called messages entail Jin showing up to Mr. Peck's business partners' houses to physically assault them in the event that they disobey him. The night that Jin came home covered in blood is a direct aftermath of one of those escapades. In episode 6, we are originally led to believe that Jin spontaneously changed as a person, growing more and more violent as the years went on. However, in Translation, we learn that he was only following orders given to him by Sun's father. In the present day of episode 6, Jin attacks Michael, and because of the language barrier, no one understands why. Later on in the episode, Sun goes to Michael and reveals that she knows English.
Oh, great. Look who came to chat.
I need to talk to you.
You speak English?
Yes.
She explains that Jin only attacked Michael because it was Jin's duty to protect her father's watch, which is now around the wrist of Michael. This also reveals that she only learned English because she had planned to leave Jin all those years ago. She's only been hiding it this long so that Jin didn't have to find out about her plan to leave. At the end of the episode, Michael hands the watch over to Jin, and Jin is unhandcuffed. In the present day of episode 17, titled In Translation, Jin has started lecturing Sun yet again about wearing a bathing suit. As mentioned before, Jin is extremely protective over Sun. Michael runs over and tries to break up this fight, but Sun slaps him for his troubles. Sun apologizes to Michael, justifying the slap she gave him with,
When I slapped you, I was protecting you.
Oh, yeah? From what?
From Jin. You don't know what he's capable of.
Sun and Michael's relationship has grown much in the last couple episodes, and now Michael feels like he has to try and save Sun from Jin's toxic behavior. And from Sun's point of view, she claims she can take care of herself, citing that she only hit Michael to protect him from Jin's wrath. Later that night, Michael's raft mysteriously catches on fire, and everyone assumes Jin had something to do with it, since he and Michael have it out for each other. Sun rushes to the caves and finds Jin with burns all over his hands, prompting her to ask him if he did it. The next morning, the group finds Jin. Michael then attacks him for destroying their only opportunity of escape, before Sun shows up begging everyone to stop hitting him. This is when she reveals to everyone, including her husband, that she knows English when she yells,
물 끓여다가 내 손이 이렇게 된 거야.
Stop it! Leave him alone! He didn't burn your raft.
She then attempts to explain that Jin's hands were burnt because he saw the fire first and attempted to put it out.
Then why did he run?
잘못하지 않았는데 왜 도망치냐고 이 사람이 물어보네요.
Exactly. That's what I thought.
My husband is many things, but he's not a liar.
You gonna lecture us about lying, Betty? From the look on his face, even your old man here didn't know you speak English.
This is where Locke shows up and brings up the fact that they all know there are others living on the island, and it was likely one of them who burned the raft.
We're so intent on pointing the finger at one another that we're ignoring the simple, undeniable truth that the problem isn't here, it's there. They've attacked us, sabotaged us, abducted us, murdered us. Maybe it's time we stopped blaming us and started worrying about them. We're not the only people on this island, and we all know it!
Michael then lets Jin go, and he leaves Sun for the caves. A little bit later on, Sun begs Jin to hear her out. As Jin prepares to leave her for good, Sun heartbreakingly admits that
이런 이유를 모르겠어. 내가 뭘 잘못했는데 우리가 언제부터 이렇게 대화가 안 됐어요. I was going to leave you. I was going to get away. But you made me change my mind. You made me think that you still loved me. 처음부터 다시 시작하고 싶어.
this is where Jin leaves the caves and the duo appear to be broken up. One character I actually haven't mentioned all that much is Charlie Pace, who is a former member of the rock band Driveshaft. Since crashing on the island, Charlie's had to deal with a very serious and pressing drug problem. You see, before the crash in episode 7 titled The Moth, Charlie's older brother and bandmate named Liam accidentally sort of opened his life up to drugs, sex, and parties, which in turn forced Charlie to lean into that lifestyle as well, in part to numb the pain of seeing what his brother had become, but also because he didn't want to rain on Liam's parade anymore. Eventually, Liam was able to get clean once his girlfriend had their baby. Charlie, however, was not. We see Charlie at one of the lowest moments in his entire life during episode 15's flashback titled Homecoming. In the episode, Charlie attempts to scam this girl that he met at a bar by stealing an expensive item in her house, all because he's out of drugs and he wants something to sell in order to buy them. He eventually secretly steals the item, and her father offers him a job selling copy machines at one of his companies. At Charlie's job interview, he is going through withdrawals and makes a complete fool out of himself. His girlfriend eventually realizes what he did and breaks up with him. Back to episode 7, Charlie confronts his brother, who is now living in Sydney. Liam refuses to rejoin the band, which forces Charlie into another bender just before the plane crash. In the second episode of the series, Charlie sits aboard flight anxiously. He runs into the bathroom just as the plane has started to hit turbulence before taking a hit of the hidden heroin in his shoe. Just then, the plane begins to go down and Charlie is miraculously able to get back into his seat. In the pilot episode, when Jack, Kate, and Charlie find the cockpit in the jungle, Charlie goes into the plane's bathroom to retrieve the bag of drugs from the toilet in order to ration out the rest of his stash. He still believes that rescue is imminent and will indeed be on its way soon. However, as he'll soon come to find out, that is not the case. Flash forward to episode 6, where Charlie, Locke, Kate, and Jack return to the caves, where Jack found his father's coffin. Jack has decided that these caves make better shelter than the beach, so they've decided to scope the place out again. As Kate and Jack leave for the beach to bring everybody back to the caves, John and Charlie decide to stay. Earlier in the episode, Charlie was about to ingest the last bit of his heroin, however, Locke caught him doing so while standing on a beehive. Later on, Locke confronts Charlie about what he saw and asks Charlie,
Do you want your guitar? More than your drug?
More than you know.
What I know is that this island just might give you what you're looking for, but you have to give the island something.
You really think you can find my guitar?
Look up, Charlie.
You're not gonna ask me to pray or something.
I want you to look up.
Charlie looks up and then magically sees his guitar case just stuck up on a cliff before handing the rest of his drugs to Locke. In the following episode, Locke tells Charlie he'll only give him back his drugs on the third request. Later that day, Charlie goes into a withdrawal-induced rage, arguing with Jack about being tossed aside all day, which causes the cave that they are standing in to collapse. As mentioned before, Charlie is eventually able to escape, and at the end of the episode, he heads back into the cave in order to grab Jack. Then, Charlie asks Locke for his drugs back for the third and final time. Disappointed, John hands them over to Charlie, who looks at the bag for a moment before throwing it in the fire. Sawyer is the selfish, chronically southern, loud-mouthed hick of the group that basically contributes nothing except to insult any and all other survivors and to take off his shirt every other episode. Sawyer is a slave to his possessions. After crashing, everybody realizes pretty quickly that all the material items that tied them to their past lives no longer matter unless they can be useful to their survival. Sawyer, on the other hand, does not learn this lesson. In episode 2, Sawyer is seen looting the remaining luggage inside the plane. According to Sawyer,
Rescue ain't coming.
Let me ask you something. How many of those pills you gonna use to fix him up?
As many as it takes.
Yeah. How many you got?
You're just not looking at the big picture, Doc.
Still back to civilization. Yeah? And where are you?
Me? I'm in the wild.
this remains Sawyer's attitude throughout a large portion of the series. Still though, there are signs that Sawyer is a good person deep down when he helps save Michael from Jin's attack. Oh yeah, another thing I forgot to mention about Sawyer's character is he's always seen reading this mysterious letter. I wonder what that's about. The answer comes in episode 8 titled Confidence Man. The episode focuses on Sawyer just a few years before the crash. Sawyer sleeps his way into convincing a married couple to fall for his con, a con that he's pulled before. However, when he sees that this couple has a young boy, he decides to call the deal off. In the present day, we get an explanation as to why this is. Shannon has run out of her inhaler medication, and everyone assumes that Sawyer stole it because why wouldn't he? Sawyer is then confronted by Kate, who questions how he can just let Shannon get worse day by day when Kate has seen that Sawyer is capable of doing the right thing. Sawyer then angrily hands her the letter that he constantly reads and forces her to read it out loud. The letter is from a young boy who states Sawyer got his parents killed. Sawyer takes the letter back from Kate, essentially proving he's always been scum. Later on in the episode, Jack has Sayid torture Sawyer in order to get the medicine back from him. Sawyer eventually agrees to talk on one condition. He demands one kiss from Kate, and Kate reluctantly agrees to do it. After a passionate makeout session, Sawyer reveals he doesn't have the medication. So he did all of this and let himself get tortured in order to keep up his reputation as a piece of garbage. After hearing about this incident, Sayid returns to the scene to stab Sawyer's arm, causing him to pass out. Later that day, Sawyer wakes up and Kate reveals she figured out Sawyer lied about being the man the letter is addressed to, thanks to the postmark. Sawyer then reveals his real name is James Ford, before explaining he wrote the letter to the man Sawyer because of what he did to his mother and father. Sawyer isn't the bad guy in this story, he's a victim of it. He took Sawyer's name because he thought it would be somewhat poetic when he confronted the man, and this kind of explains Sawyer's motivations back in the flashback of this episode. He just didn't want to turn into the man that he was hunting by destroying this family and taking all their money. Before the crash in episode 16 titled Outlaws, Sawyer travels to Australia and actually finds the man who was responsible for his parents' passing. Too scared to confront the man, Sawyer leaves for the bar where he eventually encounters Jack Shepherd's father, Christian Shepherd. After a quick chat between the two, Sawyer works up the courage to return to the man he's hunting. He decides to shoot him then and there before learning this man's real name, dispelling the information he got from his associate named Hibbs. In episode 13, a few weeks later, Sawyer is arrested in Australia for getting into a bar fight the night prior. This eventually causes him to get deported back to America, boarding Oceanic Flight 815 in order to do so. Sawyer is ultimately a very complicated person. On the surface, he's brash, self-serving, and rude, and kind of low-key racist, but deep down, he's just a scared little boy who lost his entire family to a con man that he decided to name himself after. In the present day of episode 16, Sawyer gets closer to Kate when she joins him on his journey to get revenge on a wild boar that destroyed his shelter. What a sentence, first of all. But yes, James and Kate tell stories at the campfire and play, quote, I never, which is just never have I ever with a new name. At the end of the episode, Sawyer decides to let go of chasing the boar down when he cannot bring himself to kill it, again affirming that he is a good man on the inside. Sayid quickly establishes himself as the techie of the group when he attempts to fix the radio from the cockpit of the plane. We learn early on that Sayid has a background in the Republican Guard of Iraq and was a military communications officer during the Iraq War. In episode 9, during Sayid's first flashback, he is forced to interrogate and basically torture Noor Abed Jassim, aka Nadia, a childhood friend of his. Each time Sayid visits her, the duo grow closer. Sayid begins bringing her food, hoping that it will get her to give up information about a bombing that she was recently in on. Over the weeks, Sayid is told by his superiors to kill Nadia. Sayid decides to free Nadia instead, arranging for a bus to take her to the border. This demonstrates that despite Sayid's loyalty to his country, he realizes that torturing his childhood friend is wrong, and in fact, torturing in general is probably not morally sound either. Sayid eventually leaves Iraq and makes his way to Australia, where in episode 21, titled The Greater Good, he is confronted by the CIA, who employ him to reunite with his old college roommate, Assam, who the feds believe has become a part of a terrorist cell. Sayid goes undercover to work with Assam and the terrorist cell. They plan to detonate a bomb together, but Sayid reveals his true intentions and offers to give Assam a head start on the feds. Assam sees this as a betrayal instead of a courtesy and shoots himself right in front of Sayid. Because Sayid was able to help the CIA in stopping the bombing, he is gifted immunity for his past crimes and given the location of Nadia's whereabouts. Sayid boards Flight 815 the very next day. After the plane crashes, Sayid shifts his focus to keeping the signal fire burning and fixing the radio as he longs for his reunion with Nadia. In episode 5, titled White Rabbit, once discovering that the rest of the bottles of water have gone missing, Sayid assists Kate in tracking down the culprit. At first, the duo believes Sawyer has stolen it, seeing as he's done nothing but take since arriving. However, eventually, Sayid and Kate come to realize that Boone stole the water. Whenever there's an issue at the camp, Sayid usually acts as the camp's moral compass, seeing as he spent so many years basically not having one, and now is his chance to sort of redeem himself for all the years that he was torturing people. That is until in episode 8, Sayid legitimately tortures Sawyer, which causes him to be filled with regret after having broken his promise to himself to never return to that place ever again. At the end of the episode, Sayid tells Kate,
"What I did today, what I almost did, I swore to do never again. If I can't keep that promise, I have no right to be here. Someone has to walk the shore and map the island, see what else there is. I can't think of a better person to do it than the only one I trust."
In the present day of episode 9, Sayid finds a cable running from the ocean to the jungle, so he curiously follows it through the brush, making his way into a trap. Later on, he wakes up in a dimly lit outpost or shelter of some kind. Sayid hears a woman's voice saying, "Where's Alex?" in countless different languages. This woman drops an insane amount of lore in this episode, so let me speed run through it. We learn here that she's the French woman who was stranded here all those years ago, and there was a mysterious sickness that killed basically everybody in her camp. She claims that there are others that whisper and live in the woods, but the monster that Sayid's people see isn't real. Sayid tells the woman named Danielle about his past with Nadia before he offers to fix a music box of hers. Just then, there's a noise outside in the jungle, and Danielle leaves her outpost. Sayid also breaks free from his restraints and follows her outside, pointing an unloaded gun at her. At the end of the episode, Danielle lets Sayid go, warning him that if anyone in his camp gets sick or acts strange, it might not end well. Claire Littleton is the only Australian of the group. I mean, I suppose if you leave out Sayid, who lived in Australia for a few months before the crash. And she's definitely the least memorable of the characters. With that being said, she's still one of the fan favorite characters for her intimate and less action-packed scenes with characters like Charlie and Hurley. Claire is 7 months pregnant at the start of the series, which means she will eventually give birth on the island sooner or later. She immediately has a lot of anxieties and fears surrounding this baby inside her, as it's understood that she's in her late teens/early 20s at the start of the season. Claire's fears become worse as the 10th episode, Raised by Another, comes around. In the flashback to the episode, Claire and her artist boyfriend Thomas find out that she's pregnant. Claire then visits a fortune teller who has a full-on meltdown when reading her palm. A few months later, Thomas uses this as an excuse to break up with her, as he doesn't have fatherhood in him, leaving Claire to raise the baby alone. Claire then returns to the fortune teller, who reveals to her that she must raise this baby herself or else something extremely bad will happen. That is, until a couple months later when the fortune teller finds a couple in Los Angeles who want to adopt it. The fortune teller forces her to take an oceanic flight to LA from Sydney, and the rest is basically history. Essentially, this man did all in his power to assure Claire would be the one to raise her baby. In simple terms, he knew this particular plane was going to crash, so he forced her onto it so that no one would have to adopt the baby. On the island in early episodes, Claire befriends Charlie, and the two have a very sweet friendship at first. In episode 8, titled Confidence Man, Claire confesses she misses peanut butter and wishes that there was some on the island. So Charlie brings her an empty jar and insists that it's full of peanut butter. In Raised by Another, Claire begins having terrible nightmares of a man harming her baby and injecting her with something mysterious. Around the same time, just for some context, Hurley begins a census that lists everybody on the island so that they can keep track of who's living at the caves and who's living at the beach. Claire decides to leave the caves as she deems them unsafe. Everyone assumes Claire is just making this attacker up, but when Charlie finds Claire hiking through the jungle, the duo are abducted by a man named Ethan, a man who was not on the plane's manifest. Lest we forget, Danielle proclaimed,
They were the carriers.
Who were the carriers?
The others.
What others? Have you seen other people on this island?
No. But I hear them. Out there in the jungle, they whisper.
This scenario seemingly confirms that she was telling the truth. While episodes 15 and 16 aren't necessarily Claire-focused episodes, both essentially revolve around her being kidnapped by Ethan, so I'll talk about both of those here. In the 11th episode, Jack assembles a search party for Charlie and Claire. Ethan confronts Jack and attacks him, threatening to kill Charlie if he keeps following them. Hours later, Kate and Jack stumble upon Charlie hanging by his neck from a tree. After cutting him down, Jack performs CPR for a good 5 minutes, eventually reviving Charlie. Claire, however, is nowhere to be seen. Claire eventually is found wandering in the woods in episode 14 by Locke and Boone. Once she has returned to the caves, Claire reveals she has no memory of the last few weeks. In episode 15, with Claire back in camp, Charlie has his sights set on protecting her from any and all threats. Charlie is confronted by Ethan, who threatens to kill a new survivor each day that Claire is hidden from him. Through the night, Ethan swims into the ocean and attacks through the shore to avoid the posted sentries surrounding the camp. Jack and company decide to use Claire as bait to corner Ethan, ensuring each of the survivors has a gun from the US Marshal's briefcase. This plot eventually works, however, the emotional Charlie gets involved and kills Ethan before they can arrest and question him. Claire begins to see a different side of Charlie here. As of episode 14, she has no memory of him, but she trusts that they were friends at one point. But in seeing how violent he can be, she grows to question their supposed friendship. What she doesn't know is that Charlie is just absolutely in love with her, and that's why he killed Ethan. Two characters I haven't really mentioned all that much are step-siblings Shannon and Boone. Upon crashing on the island, Shannon remains convinced that rescue is not far away, even deciding to paint her toenails and refuse to eat, insisting that there will be food on the rescue boat.
I'll eat on the rescue boat. I'll eat on the rescue boat.
Boone, on the other hand, is only slightly more level-headed. While he's certainly a lot more helpful when it comes to the daily dilemmas the survivors face, he isn't exactly the brightest character. But he is brave, as evidenced by the fact that he dove into the open ocean to try and save a drowning woman named Joanna. Boone often tries his best, as many of the others do, to contribute to their camp. Shannon, however, just sits and waits for instructions. Since Shannon helped translate the French radio broadcast, she hasn't done all that much. In episode 7, titled The Moth, she helps Sayid and Kate triangulate a signal on the radio. Boone, however, regularly helps when things go wrong. For instance, in the 11th episode, titled All the Best Cowboys Have Daddy Issues, Boone tags along with John and Jack to form a search party for Charlie and Claire. Once the group splits up, Locke and Boone end up finding a hatch in the ground that they spend many episodes trying to open, as mentioned earlier. In episode 12, titled Whatever the Case May Be, Shannon asks Boone why he and Locke never seem to bring any game back from their hunting trips, to which Boone remarks,
"We're looking for Claire."
I thought there was no trail anymore, that no one even knew where to look.
Yeah, well, at least I'm doing something.
I'm trying to contribute something. You're useless.
Shannon decides to make herself useful by helping Sayid translate some maps and journals he found at Danielle's hideout. This allows Shannon to form a bond with Sayid, and eventually she realizes the random phrases in Danielle's notes are song lyrics Shannon had heard once while living in Paris. We get both of Shannon and Boone's backstories in episode 13, titled Hearts and Minds. Set weeks or days before the crash, Shannon calls Boone on the phone and tries to get him to rescue her from her abusive boyfriend. Once Boone arrives, Shannon pretends like nothing is going on before warning him to leave and meet her back at the apartment later. Eventually, Boone finds out that this entire thing was a scam to get money that she felt she deserved from him, and a little while later, Shannon's boyfriend takes off with said money, forcing Boone to take Shannon back to LA with him. That night, Shannon and Boone sleep together, revealing their step-sibling relationship was always something a little more. It's heavily implied that this transgression wasn't their first either, and also that Boone's feelings for Shannon are a lot deeper than Shannon's are for Boone. Shannon uses this fact to get whatever she wants, and it's still prevalent in the present-day storyline. After the crash, Boone grows jealous of Shannon's new relationship with Sayid. He complains about this to Locke, who asks Boone why he cares who Shannon is into, causing him to completely dodge the question, as he doesn't want to have to explain that he's had sexual relations with his stepsister. When Boone tries to leave Locke to open the hatch alone, Locke hits Boone on the back of the head and ties him up, before drugging him with some sort of hallucinogenic paste. Locke leaves, and Boone eventually hallucinates Shannon getting killed by the monster in the jungle. After returning to camp, Boone finds out that it was all an illusion, and he was drugged by Locke, and that, quote, the island showed him Shannon's death for a specific reason. You see, as I've mentioned before, Locke has this whole theory that the island gives and takes what it wants and tests everybody living there. He believes that this vision given to Boone is the island's way of showing Boone he needed to let go of Shannon and let her do whatever she wanted to with Sayid. By episode 19, Boone is involved in that terrible accident I told you about during Locke's portion in this video, where he falls down a cliff inside of that yellow plane. And during episode 20, Jack tries to save Boone, but he is unsuccessful. By episode 21, once Shannon finds out that Boone is no longer living, she decides to take matters into her own hands and go after Locke, who is undoubtedly the reason he is dead. Sayid eventually gets her to back down, and Locke is spared. Michael Dawson and his son Walt Lloyd have an interesting relationship as well. In the first couple episodes, Michael is overly protective and controlling of Walt, who ultimately wants to explore and learn about the island that they've found themselves on. In the pilot episode, Walt meets Mr. Locke, who teaches him to play backgammon, as I mentioned earlier. Walt becomes increasingly interested in and enamored with Mr. Locke. He looks up to him as the camp's fearless and burly wild hunting man who frequently attends all of the missions and ventures and escapades basically in every episode. At this point in the season, Michael grows concerned about the duo's relationship, citing the influence Locke has on Walt as dangerous. Walt is constantly asking to hang out with Mr. Locke, and because Michael deems him dangerous to Walt, this causes a further divide between the father and son duo. We also learn early on that Michael was never in Walt's life growing up. This plane crash is genuinely the first time they've ever spent time together. Well, if you discount when Walt was a toddler, I suppose. I think it's mentioned early on that Walt's mother died recently, which was the cause of Michael's sudden guardianship of Walt, but we don't truly see this happen until episode 14. We learn in this episode, titled Special, that when Walt was really young, his mother Susan moved them to Amsterdam, leaving behind Michael in America. In another scene, presumably a few weeks later, Michael calls Susan and finds out that she got together with her coworker in Amsterdam. As the scene comes to a close, Michael accidentally walks into oncoming traffic and is hit by a car, which sends him to the hospital. Months after the accident, Michael makes a greeting card for Walt, which reveals to us his passion for art. A few scenes later, a now grown-up Walt begins acting very odd. He's trying to get his parents to listen to him about his obsession with birds or something like that, and just then, his mother begins to feel unwell. Subsequently, the exact bird that Walt was talking about moments earlier slams into the wall, forcing Walt's stepfather to question if he is psychic. Michael reunites with Walt for the first time since he was a toddler because of Susan's recent passing. Michael was forced out of Walt's life when he was young, and now he has to come to terms with the fact that he is being forced into his life. Michael brings Walt back to America via Flight 815, by the way, which, as we all know, eventually crashes on this very island, forcing the duo to try and bond and form a relationship in the middle of this trauma. This results in Michael coming off as really overprotective, as he doesn't want anything to happen to Walt now that he is suddenly in charge of him. When Walt prefers hanging out with Mr. Locke throughout the season, Michael forbids it, especially in episode 14. Eventually, Walt, who Locke believes has some kind of psychic connection to the island, goes missing, forcing Michael to ask Locke to help find him. The duo work together to rescue Walt from a polar bear in the jungle. Michael and Walt then have a better relationship and understanding going forward. Michael learns to let go a little bit, which in turn allows Walt to hear Michael out and turn to his father for comfort. Oh yeah, also in this episode, Michael begins working on a raft to attempt to leave the island in order to find rescue. In Walkabout, it's revealed that Locke was paralyzed for 4 years. In the pilot episode, Oceanic Flight 815, or 815, crash lands on the island. In episode 6, House of the Rising Sun, Sun is told to wait 15 minutes before the hour to exit the airport to her escape cab. Back in the pilot episode, the castaways learn that a French woman who we would come to know as Danielle Rousseau was trapped on the island for 16 years. In All the Best Cowboys Have Daddy Issues, Jack pounds on Charlie's chest an exact 23 times before he is revived. And finally, in Raised by Another, Claire realizes her period is exactly 42 days late. 4, 8, 15, 16, 23, 42. What do these numbers even mean, and why do they show up so much throughout the series? Episode 18, titled Numbers, gives us some explanations, but not necessarily the ones we are looking for just yet. That comes quite later on in the series, which we will get to later. Before the crash, Hurley, or Hugo if you want to get technical, played the numbers 4, 8, 15, 16, 23, and 42 to win the lottery. Yes, you heard that correctly. Hurley is a lottery winner in the past storyline. In the following weeks, he begins to notice that since collecting his fortune, he's become somewhat cursed. At first, he takes everything bad that happens around him as coincidence, but then when his grandfather dies of a heart attack and his brother's wife breaks up with him, and his mother breaks her foot as he surprises her with a new house, which naturally catches on fire as it would, Hurley begins to question if this money he's received is somehow cursed. This leads him to confront an old friend of his living at a mental hospital. This friend of his, named Leonard, is where he got the winning 6 numbers from. Leonard reveals to Hurley that, quote, the numbers are bad. Oh, okay. I'm sure we'll figure out what that means. Hurley's search for answers eventually leads him to Kalgoorlie, Australia, where he meets the wife of Leonard's former best friend from his Navy days. Hurley asks this woman where the numbers even came from, and the woman describes the situation in great detail.
Sam and Leonard was stationed at a listening post monitoring long-wave transmissions out of the Pacific. Nothing to do with listening to static. Night after night. Till one night, about 16 years ago, there's something in the static. A voice comes through. A voice repeating those numbers over and over again. A couple of days later, we're at the fair in Kalgoorlie, and some wally there's got this jar. Must have been big as a pony, and it's filled to the rim with beans. Phil is offering 50 grand to anyone able to guess how many beans are in that jar.
Sam used the numbers.
The answer was exact to the bean. Men had been running the same scheme for 40 years. Nobody'd ever come close. So we won the money. On the way home, a pickup truck blows a tire on the highway. Lost my leg that night. He was never the same after that. He started keeping a record. Anything terrible that happened to anyone round us, he believed it was all because he used those numbers. He moved us out here in the middle of nowhere.
Did he ever find a way to make it stop?
Yep, he put a shotgun in his mouth and pulled the trigger.
Eventually, she tries to put an end to Hurley's worries by explaining the obsession with the numbers is what got her husband killed. She tries to convince Hurley to stop worrying about it because it's only going to lead him down the same path eventually. So Hurley just ends up leaving her house with literally no answers besides what happened to this man. In the present day, after Hurley sees the numbers written down on a notebook that Sayid stole from Danielle, he ventures out into the jungle to find her and ask her where they came from and why she knows about them. Charlie, Jack, and Sayid follow him out into the woods as well. The others think Hurley is absolutely insane for wanting to make contact with Danielle. They're concerned that Hurley might be losing it a little bit, which out in the wilderness is not exactly hard to do. Eventually, the group gets separated when an old rickety bridge breaks, forcing Jack and Sayid to turn around. Hurley eventually finds Danielle, who explains,
"Our ship picked up a transmission. A voice repeating those numbers. We changed course to investigate. After we shipwrecked, my team continued to search for the transmission source. It was weeks before we found the radio tower.
There's a radio tower on this island?
Yes. Up by the Black Rock. Some of us continued to search for the meaning of those numbers while we waited for rescue.
Did you ever find out anything about them? Do you know where they got their power?
Power?
They're cursed. You know that, right? The numbers. They're cursed.
The numbers are what brought me here. As it appears, they brought you. Since that time, I've lost everything. Everyone I cared about. So yes, I suppose you're right. They are cursed.
This moment is extremely vindicating for Hurley, who has spent the last couple years trying to get people to believe him about these numbers. Factor in the added implication that Hurley previously had possibly spent time at a mental institution where he was probably thought of as crazy, and this moment definitely sticks out to him. Hurley is finally able to be heard by somebody who doesn't think he's crazy. Granted, that person is Danielle Rousseau, who's been living out in the jungle for 16 years, But I digress. While an answer to the question raised in this episode doesn't come for quite a long time, this episode's main goal was never to answer that anyway, as the numbers will remain a pivotal mystery throughout the rest of the series. This episode was actually a lot more effective at providing a long-awaited backstory and much-needed character development for the previously pretty one-note Hurley. And now the moment we have all been waiting for is finally here. It's time to get into the Lost Season 1 3-part finale. The 3 episodes are riddled with flashbacks, all mostly set the day of the crash. Each one gives us a new snapshot of what the characters were up to right before boarding the plane. For instance, Michael and Walt remain at each other's throats as they attempt to form a bond amidst just meeting each other. Once at the airport, Michael calls his mother, begging her to help him watch Walt while he's at work. It's clear that Michael didn't think this whole situation through enough, as he didn't exactly have a whole lot of time to prepare for Susan's death. Walt then walks over and hears Michael talking about how he feels scared and unprepared for fatherhood, ultimately confirming what we've come to know about Michael throughout the season. He's just doing his best. In early episodes, he didn't exactly know how to handle a child. He was barely in Walt's life for the first 3/4 of it. It's no shocker it'd take him time to just adjust to everything that comes along with fatherhood. It's also one of the reasons Michael is fighting tooth and nail to get off of the island in the present-day storyline. He wants so badly to craft a real relationship with his son in the real world. I'm sure he feels cheated out of the opportunity he once had to grow as a person and father once the plane crashed. Before the plane crash, it seemed like he was going to cave and walk out on Walt, or just straight up give all the responsibility to somebody else. Juxtaposing this to what's going on in the present day showcases how Michael has truly grown as a loving father who really has gotten to know his son in the last month and a half. Another flashback sees Jack meeting a woman named Ana Lucia in the airport bar. She confesses she overheard Jack yelling at the flight attendant just moments before, and the two share a small conversation about how they're both going to be on the same oceanic flight later that day. The scene ends with Anna getting a call from someone else, and this flashback on the surface doesn't seem to be that important in the context of this specific episode. However, just wait, we will get there. We'll get there in season 2, don't you worry. Elsewhere in the airport, Kate and the US Marshal she's traveling with make their way through customs, but not before Kate gets upset at what the Marshal has to say about her ex-best friend Tom. This causes her to attack him in order to defend her relationship with him, I guess, or the fact that she was really in love with him. Also in the airport, Shannon and Boone are about to request to change seats when none other than Sayid asks Shannon to watch his bags. Something that she initially agrees to do, however, eventually she ignores it and walks away. In fact, not only does she abandon his bags, but she calls airport security on him for being quote-unquote suspiciously Middle Eastern. Obviously, this was only written in the episode to kind of poke fun at the fact that Shannon and Sayid are now in a romantic relationship of some kind. I guess you could also argue that this somehow displays Shannon has truly grown as a person to put other people above herself, and more specifically how she's grown to drop her preconceived biases against people who don't look like her. Another flashback sees Jin and Sun eating a meal with each other before the flight. An American couple mocks Sun as she accidentally spills a drink on Jin and helps clean it up. Sun has to hold back her emotions towards this couple as she cannot risk letting Jin know that she understands English. Right after this, Jin goes to the bathroom to wash up, encountering Mr. Peck's associate. The man reveals that Mr. Peck knows Jin is about to run away from Korea after this next mission is finished. He threatens Jin and says,
그리고 자네가 도망갈 이유는 곧도 알고 있지. 자네는 계획대로 남은 시계로 캘리포니아에 있는 백 회장님 친구에게 전달하고 만약 그렇게 못하면 자네는 군유를 잃게 되겠지.
The scene obviously reinforces what we've come to know about Jin in episode 17, which is that he never actually did anything all that evil and was just under the control of Sun's father in order to keep his relationship with Sun. There are a bunch of other flashbacks, but the final ones in the episode see all of our beloved castaways boarding the airplane and preparing for the bumpiest ride of their entire lives. I really like this as the final flashback of the first season because it doesn't just center on one person. Its entire goal is to wrap up all the stories of all 14 main characters and provide extra context into what their lives were like prior to the crash, resulting in an episode that makes you feel like you know the characters a lot better for it. In the present day of the 3-part finale, Danielle Rousseau comes barging into the camp to announce that, quote, the others, commonly associated with Ethan, are coming. How does she know this? Well, the castaways spend most of this episode either preparing for the raft and its launch at sea, or hiking through the jungle toward a mysterious black rock. The entire reason why they are headed there is to acquire some dynamite in order to blow open the hatch that Locke found in the mid-season finale. His thinking process is that maybe the hatch is some sort of bunker that can hide all of their people while the others attack at the beach. The group end up bringing along this high school teacher with them named Dr. Austen, who claims to know a lot about dynamite. Once they arrive at the Black Rock, we realize that the rock isn't a rock at all, it's actually a slave transport ship from at least a few hundred years ago. They enter the vessel and retrieve the TNT, which prompts Dr. Austen to pretend like he knows what he's doing. This results in this happening.
All right, we're not going to take any more of this stuff than we need because nitroglycerin is extremely temperamental. So we
The group then arrive at the hatch, and Jack and Locke get into some sort of philosophical argument about what brought them to the island.
John chose you too, Jack. It's destiny.
Did you talk with Boone about destiny, John?
Boone was a sacrifice that the island demanded. What happened to him at that plane was a part of a chain of events that led us here, that led us down a path, that led you and me to this day, to right now.
And where's that path end, John?
The path ends at the hatch. The hatch, Jack. All of it happened so that we could open the hatch.
No, we're opening the hatch so that we can survive.
Survival is all relative, Jack.
Locke is a character who has spent the entire season seeing and hearing things that the others don't. From the very moment that the plane crashed on the island, he was privy to a key mystery of it. He immediately regained his ability to walk after having a scientifically 0 chance of ever walking again. Jack, on the other hand, has run from most of the unexplained happenings. In White Rabbit, he tries to confront what he believes could be the ghost of his father, but the island does not give him an answer, instead bringing him to his father's empty casket, leaving it a mystery. Ever since that very moment, Jack has been very uninterested in entertaining anything but what the eye can see. This whole man of science versus man of faith debacle will lead these two down many philosophical debates throughout the series, and this latest one comes at the most crucial time that they've ever faced. Their camp is about to be obliterated by a group of others, all supposedly as violent and evil as Ethan was, and yet here they are debating about what brought them to the island and what the island actually is, and what's inside this mysterious hatch. Elsewhere, Jin, Sawyer, Michael, and Walt finally take off on the raft, and later that night, they encounter a rescue boat. Their celebration doesn't last very long, though, because the group of men on the rescue boat immediately take Walt from them and destroy their raft, leaving the other 3 survivors shipwrecked. Oh, also, there's this kind of irrelevant plot that happens throughout the episode where Danielle returns back to the castaways camp to steal Claire's baby, and Charlie and Sayid have to venture into the jungle to retrieve him. It's here where Danielle reveals that she set the fires and practically made the entire others threat up in order to kidnap Aaron. And at the very end of the episode, Hurley notices the numbers printed on the hatch. He tries to issue a warning to the rest of the castaways not to open it, as he still believes the numbers are cursed. Locke doesn't listen to any of his warnings and uses the dynamite to open the hatch. When the smoke clears, Jack and Locke look down into a bottomless pit, just before the season cuts to black. The very concept of Season 1 follows a pretty straightforward trajectory if you ask me. A group of castaways crash land on a mysterious island, and each episode focuses on a different one as they unpacked all their metaphorical baggage and attempt to survive what's just happened to them. Obviously, there are a few elements that serve the overarching story in each episode, but for the most part, we're dealing with a Monster of the Week vibe, just without the monsters, for the most part. The show is ultimately a procedural disguised as a fictional version of Survivor. Add in a few teaspoons of sci-fi, horror, drama, and romance, and you have yourselves a hit. It cannot be understated just how successful Lost Season 1 was. The show was really unlike anything airing at the time. Look at ABC's lineup at the time and just try to find a show like Lost. You had legal dramas, spy thrillers, sitcoms, police procedurals, and reality TV. You'd be hard-pressed to find a high-concept sci-fi survival drama with elements of horror, adventure, comedy, and romance in it. In fact, it'd be difficult to find anything like that in most of the big networks at the time. And yet, the show had one of the most watched pilots in ABC history. And let's not forget about the awards season that Lost had that year. Out of the 12 Emmy nominations, which is insane by the way, Lost walked away with an astounding 6. The series would also be nominated at the 63rd Golden Globes for Best Television Series, which it also walked away with, beating Commander-in-Chief, Grey's Anatomy, Rome, and Prison Break. While Season 1 remains somewhat grounded and character-based, Season 2 is sort of where the show begins raising more and more questions surrounding the island. Season 2 is even wilder than Season 1, but I'll get into that in the next part of this series. With that being said, I think I have finally come to the end of this video. I know a lot of it was probably out of order and a little confusing at times, and I'm sure I missed a lot, so if I did, please sound off down in the comments. Again, I'm gonna get to everyone else's next stories in the Season 2 and Season 3 and Season 4 and all the way down to Season 6 videos, so make sure to stay tuned because eventually I will get to those videos. Also, do let me know if you want me to change the format back to a regular recap for Seasons 2 through 6. I think it would make sense to do that because those seasons you're not really meeting the characters for the first time. The core cast is pretty much all introduced here, which is why I thought it would be apropos to do this recap this way and like break it down character by character. I don't know if I can do that for the next few videos because each character only gets like 2 flashbacks or like even just 1 flashback, and in this video, a lot of characters get 2 or 3, or Jack even gets like 4, I think. But just let me know down below if you guys want a more traditional recap for the next video, and I will definitely oblige. So yeah, I love you guys. I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!